Y'all, every day when I stream, I get the exact same question. What is the best school to pick in Wizard 101? So I thought in this video today, we would do a ranking of every school in PvE so that we can answer that question here and now in 2025. Now, I know what y'all are wondering, right? Sauce, haven't you made this video before? Listen, that was 8 years ago. I was not even like an adult. Y'all can trust my judgment now compared to then, and a lot of things have changed in the game since then. So the criteria is simple, right? This is a PvE tier list. I'm not gonna talk about PvP. So we're talking about things like questing, things like spells, things like farming. What school is the best by the time you're done questing at level 170? Starting right off at number 7, I do so believe that Ice is the most unremarkable school at max level by the time you're done questing. It is the least worth to choose if you're coming back to Wiz or starting for the first time. I'm sorry to all the Ice mains that I'm hurting with this statement, but here's the deal, right? Ice is known for its relatively high HP and its extremely high resist, but in the years that have gone on, Ice actually doesn't even have the most HP anymore. It just has marginally more resist. But the name of the game in PvE, right? While all of these spells that can help people tank like Tower Shield, Legion Shield, Ice Armor, Frozen Armor, while all these spells are really good for tanking, the name of the game at the end of the day, especially when it comes to questing, is to actually kill the enemy that you're facing. Not only is Ice literally the worst at it, probably the best spell that you're gonna get for PvE is the updated Frost Giant. It does 615 if you can tier it all the way up. Pretty decent, still worse than every other AoE in game, right? All of this tank ability, it comes at the cost of damage output, and Ice is not even that good at supporting like other schools that we're gonna mention. So even if you're questing with someone else, it's gonna be pretty hard for your Ice to stand out. Number 6 on this tier list, almost as unremarkable as Ice by the time we get to max level, I gotta put Myth. Now this bothers me because I really do love the Myth school, but there's a really good reason why it's very low on this tier list. There's two really big parts of Myth's identity that just is not, like, it doesn't work realistically after a while. The two parts that I'm talking about are minions and stuns. By the time you get to, like, I don't know, Zafaria, Avalon-ish, minions are borderline useless. There is a minion, I don't even think I've done this quest. It might be one of these quests. There's a minion that you get, I think called Vasanji or something. Like, it's like a level 60 to level 70, no PvP minion. But every school gets one of those, so Myth isn't, like, unique in that scenario at all. And it's not like that minion is even that good by the end of your playthrough, and almost every boss is stun immune, I think by the middle of Arc 2, maybe even earlier. So minions and stuns are out. What does Myth get? Well, it gets a pretty decent resist profile. I think I'm actually running slightly low res. This is like closer to my PvP setup, but you do have slightly more resist. It comes at the expense of HP. By the time you're max level, you'll notice you have less HP than a fire, even though you'll have more res. And really all you're left with other than that is some decent anti-shield and anti-weakness removal spells, but any school can learn Purge, and Pierce treasure cards are probably just your best bet if you don't want to, like, require having a Myth, right? There's nothing that you could really do on a Myth that you can't do on another school for support anyways, and it's not even like it's a lot of gold for like a Pierce treasure card. You don't even have to worry about like the supply of things like that. Shatter might be a little bit rarer, but even Shatter isn't like the be-all end-all. Like, yeah, this could remove all shields, but there's also other ways to get around shields. I'll say the only reason that I'm putting Myth above Ice is because of spells like Shatter, Pierce, Purge, right? Like some kind of support that's a little bit unique to this school. But yeah, I'd love to see a world where Myth gets like stuns and minions that actually matter in the PvE playthrough, because otherwise, especially after early game, I feel like Myth is actually just worse in every way compared to every other school. Number 5 on this tier list, we're gonna have to go with the Life school. Life, as you might have recalled from what I talked about with Ice, is actually now the highest health school at max level. This change, it happened somewhat early on. I want to say around level 110, level 120, but from there onwards, you just get more and more health. This is something that I would argue does help, especially when it involves bosses with cheats that include Pierce, right? HP is not something that really can get affected by cheats like resist can, or stats for that matter. And while I do think that the insanity that is Life's health is a really cool aspect, and that does put it up on this tier list, it doesn't really have any remarkable stats outside of that. I would say the damage, resist, pierce, they're all like relatively low, even if you run full damage. Now, it used to be a lot worse when your best AoE was an 8-pip Forest Lord. Now it's a 7-pip Forest Lord that you can actually learn as early as Dragonspire. But I would say the real reason it's so high up on this tier list is mainly just because of its healing identity, right? When it comes to support, if you do need a healer, Life is still the only school that can really do that, right? You're looking at spells like Rebirth that can heal everyone for about 1,000 and give them an absorb. That's like ridiculous even to this day. What I think is really, really cool, something that we haven't really seen them, like, you know, really take advantage of in PvE, but I still find it cool. When you start leveling up, you actually unlock pins, and they added outgoing pins to the game so that you could actually naturally affix extra healing stats to yourself. So this little life mending pin, it's like 30% outgoing. I could unsocket this and put it onto any shield pin on any hat. And considering that you can actually put multiple shield pins on depending on the setup that you're running, it's just a lot easier to run outgoing without giving up every other stat, like damage, like resist, like all of these other things. So I feel like the versatility of the life build at max, it's a lot better than it ever used to be. And I'm running like a PvP setup. It's not crazy to get like over 80% outgoing while running offensive stats. So imagine as a support what you could do if you want to like max value outgoing. It is really unique. It's a part of the game that only life can do, especially now that pins are there and it's not as much of a stat burden. Number 4 on this tier list definitely has to be balance. Now, kind of similar to Myth, balance doesn't really have a stat that sets it apart, right? So far in this tier list, we mentioned Ice's resist and Life's HP. Balance is yet another one of those schools, as I think very intentionally, it doesn't really stand out when it comes to any one stat. I will say this though, it's relatively high res and also high HP. You're looking at stats very similar in terms of like tankability to Death, which I would argue is like maybe the second most tanky school in the game right after Ice. So it's comparable to the second most tankiest school. That's pretty good, but I would argue the only real reason that balance is so far up on this tier list is because of its ability to buff anybody in the game. Right, if you're looking for a support setup, things like Blade Storm, Balance Blade, things like Hex as well. I mean, these are just literally must-haves if you're in a farming team and you don't want to take forever. Now, a lot of people get away from this using things like feints and even the mass feint hat. So obviously, yeah, you don't need a balance if you have these things. But if you don't want to spend too many training points in one direction, if you don't want to spend crowns to get an item card mass feint, then this is a school that will be significantly better than any other school for support and buffing. It also does naturally come with heals like Helping Hands and Availing Hands, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the fact that it is the second best healing school, I think that's still a big deal. The only reason for PvE anyways that balance isn't higher on the tier list, it's because the solo PvE experience is actually kind of ridiculous. Unlike every other school on this tier list, there's no such thing as a balanced prism. So anytime you face off, right, against a balanced mob or a balanced boss, there's no real way to convert your balanced damage. Like, let's say you use Power Nova, you can't convert that 645 balance damage into something else other than with the item cards you get way late in the game. It forces you to have to use the balance spells that hit without using balance damage, like Chimera, which uses spirit damage. You have Spectral Blast, which does elemental damage, but things like Spectral Blast are kind of RNG. You might not get the actual damage that you want out of it. And spells like Hydra and Chimera, they're just hard to buff because there's so many weird schools, right? A single trap only buffs a third of these. So it is a little weird, especially when you're soloing. And sometimes, you know, let's say that you have a hitter that you're playing with, it is nice to be able to back up hit. I would still say balance is bad at that. But one of the big criteria in this tier list is, right, when you get to max level, how unique of a wizard are you getting, right? How much value are you getting? You're getting a lot of value out of a balance. Number 3 on this tier list has to be the mighty Storm School. Now, Storm is the highest damage school in Wizard101. And not only can you get like the highest damage, which is like, I want to say like 238-ish pretty easily, you also can just give up a little bit of damage and still run full resist, which not every other school can actually do. And not only do you get a ton of damage, your spells also do way more damage. So if you're looking at immediate burst damage, spells like like Tempest, Stormlord, and obviously the new Bunyips. Like, these are just like insanity. They'll literally one-shot every mob late game if you have somebody blading you or mass fainting for you. So if you end up with a max level Storm, you have a very uniquely good hitter, right? This is like, if you get the right stats, you could actually, like, you know, not die. And like, the fragility isn't really that crazy with resist like this, and you could also do a lot of damage output. That's really, really good. I will say this though, it is not super versatile the second things get a little bit tougher than just blade AoE, right? The second you have like weakness cheats or shield cheats or even bosses that you're going second to that can do stuff like that, the damage output of Storm, it actually goes down quite a bit. And obviously, even with a lot of damage and res, your health is still the lowest in the school. You're gonna be lucky to get like even 10,000 HP with a good hitting setup. You could probably stretch that a little bit. But when you're looking at mobs that can do big high pip spells with a lot of crit, right? You kind of do depend on a tank to have the best chances in PvE. I would actually put Storm higher on this tier list despite all of this if the early game of Storm wasn't a goddamn nightmare. Before you get Tempest, the PvE experience is awful. You can fizzle like crazy, and you don't have a good AoE. You don't have any of the utilities that the other schools have, and your low HP, especially back then, really holds you back. This is probably close to one of the worst schools to solo the game on. I think it contends with maybe balance, and that's about it. Maybe Myth, I don't know. But if you're like, you know, 2 or 3 wizards into the game, I'd say, and you haven't made a Storm, I'd say Storm is the logical next bet. It's beautiful when you need to farm stuff. It's probably integral to every raid strat, every gold key strat. So any end game loot that you want, you're gonna want a Storm for it. So it's very, very high on this tier list. Number 2 on this tier list. Now, this was a very, very hard decision for me. But you know what? I am gonna put Death as number 2. For one reason. I think it's too good. There's a very, very simple reason for this, and this is because of drains, right? Now, I have my lower tier, I have my lower path spell writing stuff set for PvP. But let's say that you got all these spellmans, and you max tiered Scarecrow, right? A 630 damage drain, especially one that doesn't have a drop-off as you get more and more minions. Death is the only school that doesn't actually get worse in PvE as you go against more mobs, right? Like, when you escalate from the 1v1s in Wizard City to the 2v1s in Krakatopia, right? Especially when you get Scarecrow, every single battle from then on, being able to turn half your damage into, like, actual healing, it's just really, really overpowered. And while Scarecrow is one example, Ghoul is literally incredible for this at low level. Vampire is probably a must-have for at least the middle of Arc 1 all the way until Dragonspire. And Enchanted Wraith does north of 800 damage, like with a Monstrous in Arc 1. Like, you really won't have a high chance of dying if you just run a little bit of death damage and just drain spam every mob. And as if all of that isn't enough, you actually get a shocking amount of universal buffs if you want to be support, right? The iconic feint spell, it's in this school. This Death is the only school that doesn't have to spend the 7 training points to learn this. But as if all of that wasn't enough, you also get Dark Pact, which for a small little bit of damage to yourself can universal blade someone else twice. And for some inexplicable reason, still Curse. It's just as good as Hex, which is the balanced universal trap. In fact, they did a trap audit recently that made Curse better than it used to be. So you have an even better universal trap as well than you ever used to. I can't say a negative thing about this school. It has good HP, extremely good damage, extremely good resist. These are the best stats for PvE. But the reason it's number 2 on this tier list is, even if it's your first playthrough, I would not recommend Death, because I think it gives you the wrong idea of the difficulty of this game and how unique the schools can be. And if you're looking for a challenge of any sort, anything that resembled what Wiz used to be, I think Death is the worst. It's the worst choice. So I'm gonna put it number 2 because I think that the gameplay becomes even more boring, bland, no stakes involved than any other school, and it's only getting worse as time goes on. And y'all might have guessed it, that means Fire is at the top of the 2025 PvE tier list. Why do I think that you will get the most out of making a Fire, especially for PvE? Well, there's a couple of reasons, right? Right now, if you want the maximum damage output, right? Let's say that you want to go in with a team, you want to one turn the most powerful boss in the game. Well, the best way to do that is to have a Fire hitting, for you to scald, and then for someone to use the Incendiate item card from the Professor Fire Hat. I'm talking about the Incendiate card. This destroys all overtimes and deals 200% damage. And Scald, even with an enchant, it's not going to do upfront as much damage like a Bunyips, right? Like a Bunyips is like a comparable 5-pip storm spell that'll do more, like, you know, if you're not doing an Incendiate. But dots still get a pretty decent bonus. It's comparable to storm damage. And then when you have an Incendiate added onto it, it is literally the best hit in the game. I doubt they're ever going to come out with something that's better than a Mass Feint Scald Incendiate. If you want to quest through a new world and you want to do it at the speed of light, do it with a fire hitter. That's my opinion. And unlike Storm, overtimes aren't, like, you know, like held back by shield, so it's also an extra layer of versatility. If somebody does shield and, like, you know, you want to get around it, you don't have to go the route of a Scald. You have other really good options like Sun Serpent, which is a single hit that also AoEs a little bit. I've even seen people do Incendiate strategies with Rain of Fire. I've seen people do one-shot strategies with, you know, the damage version of Sun Serpent. Like, there's a lot more versatility to this school. You could even, as if all of that isn't enough, if you do Top Hat Scion, all you have to do is trap a lot. You get 2280 damage. It's like ridiculous, right? There's so many unique ways to buff a fire and get damage output out of it that I think is just a more versatile hitter. It also does have quite a bit of HP for a hitting school, and the 60 resist is not that bad considering how much damage you can get while not giving up res either. And let's say that you're playing solo, I do think that it's super realistic that you could do it on a fire, and outside of the early fizzles, which will rectify kind of early compared to Storm even, outside of that, I feel like it's challenging, it's fun, it's doable, and I think if you're playing for the first time or even returning, you could still get something out of a fire playthrough, and that's why I think fire is kind of goated. Let me know what y'all think of this tier list. I've been doing PvP tier lists for a few years now, so I thought it would be a nice change, especially since so many people ask what school they should pick. Hopefully, you get a good idea with this video of what you'll end up with as level 170 and what your solo or even team playthrough might resemble. I don't know. Everyone's playthrough is different, so don't take this tier list too seriously if you were, like, you know, trying to decide between schools that were low on this. Let me know if my tier list aligns with y'all's tier list in the comments. I look forward to reading all of y'all's thoughts. Drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.